During his presidency, Donald Trump made it clear that his foreign policy would be rooted in the America First doctrine, focusing on domestic priorities over international commitments. His meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky on February 28, 2025, turned into a tense confrontation, with Trump expressing his deep frustration over U.S. support for Ukraine. Several key factors contributed to his anger and reluctance to continue military aid. Throughout his 2024 election campaign, Trump repeatedly criticized what he called reckless spending on foreign aid, particularly military assistance to Ukraine. He insisted that any financial aid provided to other nations, especially those engaged in conflicts, should come with strict oversight and accountability. Intelligence reports had surfaced suggesting that some of the previously allocated military aid to Ukraine had been mismanaged or diverted to unintended channels. Allegations of corruption and inefficiency within the Ukrainian government further fueled Trump's skepticism. He was particularly frustrated by reports indicating that U.S. supplied weapons and financial resources were sometimes falling into the wrong hands, either through black market activities or misallocation within Ukraine's bureaucracy. As a result, Trump saw continued financial support as a bad investment and expressed his unwillingness to send more U.S. taxpayer money without a guarantee of transparency. Trump had long argued that the United States should prioritize its own national security and economic interests over foreign conflicts. He firmly believed that the war in Ukraine was not America's responsibility alone, but rather an issue that should primarily concern European nations. During the meeting, Trump reportedly told Zelensky, "Why should American taxpayers keep funding your war when Germany, France, and the rest of Europe should be leading this effort? They're your neighbors. It's their problem first." He criticized NATO allies for not contributing enough to Ukraine's defense, despite being geographically closer to the conflict and having a direct stake in European security. Trump viewed this as yet another example of America carrying the financial burden for global conflicts while European nations benefited without making equivalent contributions. This argument had been central to his campaign, where he vowed to cut unnecessary foreign spending and redirect resources toward U.S. domestic priorities such as border security, infrastructure, and economic development. Unlike previous administrations, Trump had expressed an interest in improving diplomatic ties with Russia and establishing a more cooperative relationship with President Vladimir Putin. He believed that reducing tensions with Moscow would be more beneficial for the U.S. than engaging in prolonged geopolitical conflicts. Trump viewed U.S. military assistance to Ukraine as a direct provocation toward Russia, which could jeopardize his efforts to negotiate a new diplomatic approach with Putin. His administration had already signaled a shift in U.S. foreign policy, aiming to de-escalate conflicts rather than escalate them. During the heated meeting, Trump reportedly accused Ukraine of dragging the U.S. into an unnecessary standoff with Russia, further reinforcing his belief that continued support for Ukraine was not in America's best interest. Trump's frustration was also fueled by Ukraine's unwillingness to negotiate a peace settlement with Russia. In his view, continued fighting would only prolong the war and drain more resources without leading to a decisive victory for Ukraine. During the meeting, Trump allegedly pressured Zelensky to engage in direct negotiations with Russia, suggesting that a diplomatic resolution, even if it required territorial concessions, would be preferable to endless warfare. He reportedly warned, "If you're not willing to sit down and negotiate with Russia, then don't expect America to keep footing the bill." Zelensky, however, outright rejected the idea of ceding any Ukrainian territory to Russia, calling it unacceptable and arguing that such a move would set a dangerous precedent for global conflicts. Trump's insistence on a peace deal and Zelensky's refusal created a major rift between the two leaders, further escalating tensions. One of Trump's key pledges during his 2024 presidential campaign was to end America's involvement in foreign wars and reduce overseas financial aid. He frequently criticized previous administrations for spending trillions of dollars on conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, with little to show in return. Trump's supporters, many of whom were concerned about domestic economic issues, had pressured him to cut down on foreign expenditures and focus on strengthening America's economy, infrastructure, and national security. His reluctance to continue supporting Ukraine was not just about the war itself. It was also about delivering on his campaign promises and maintaining support from his voter base. Providing additional military aid to Ukraine would have contradicted his commitment to putting America first, something he was determined to avoid. Ukraine had long sought NATO membership, a move that Russia considered a major security threat. Trump, however, was opposed to Ukraine joining NATO, as he believed it would further escalate tensions with Russia and potentially drag the U.S. into a larger military confrontation. This became another major point of contention between Trump and Zelensky. The Ukrainian president saw NATO membership as a vital step toward ensuring his country's security, while Trump viewed it as an unnecessary provocation against Russia. During the meeting, sources claimed that Trump firmly told Zelensky, "Ukraine's NATO ambitions are not America's problem. If you keep pushing for NATO membership, don't expect our support." Zelensky, frustrated by Trump's stance, argued that without U.S. backing, Ukraine would remain vulnerable to Russian aggression. But Trump remained unmoved by his concerns.